All right, let's do it. We're going to go through three separate scenes. The first scene is around a well. The second scene is going to take place, as we'll see, it picks up in verse 15. I don't know exactly. It's maybe in a field or kind of just a work environment. And then the third scene is going to take place in a kind of a feast environment. Verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked and he saw a well in the field. Wells have been pretty common in Genesis, if you've been with us. And behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of the well the flocks were watered. The stone of the well of the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Verse 4, Jacob said to them, my brothers, where do you come from? They said, we are from Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, we know him. And he said to them, is it well with him? They said, it is well. And see, Rachel's daughter is coming with the sheep. Verse 7, he said, behold, it is still high day. Is it not time for the livestock to be gathered together? Water the sheep and go and pasture them. And they said, we cannot until the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled in the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. So kind of sets the context. A few things we got to acknowledge. Number one is this is the same journey that Abraham's servant went for Isaac. So the journey of his grandfather's servant went on this. There's going to be a lot of similarities. They arrive at this well. We don't know if it's the exact same well, but they arrive at this well. And Rebekah sent Jacob over there. And we're going to meet Rebekah's brother, who we saw back in Genesis 24 as well. Well, as Jacob rolls in, there's 2 things that are kind of predominant in the first 8 verses, and then in total the first 12 verses. Number one is it keeps talking about this well and the mouth of this well. So there seems to be, and this will be important as the story goes on, this well that requires some big stone to be moved off of it. It apparently requires a few of them because all the sheep are gathered there, and they want to wait till everyone is there before they start watering the sheep, which leads to the second thing. Verse 7 seems to be an indictment from Jacob to these men that he just met. He's like, yo, why are you being lazy and sitting around? Open up the well so they can drink, or let's let them get out to pasture. Now, both those things are going to matter. The first thing being the mouth of this well, and the second thing being them sitting around because of verses 9 through 12. It says this, while he was still speaking with them, it feels like accusing them, while he's still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Verse 10, now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was his father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. So Rachel seems to be doing what the other maybe shepherds are supposed to be doing. She had her sheep out to pasture. Now she's coming in, and there's 3 things that Jacob is going to do in response to this. The first one is he's going to remove the cover of the well. Now, this first thing is, and the second thing is, and the third thing is all out of pocket. The first thing in him removing the cover of the well, either, number one, we're meant to see him as very strong because it requires a few people to do this. Or number 2, he's just being rude, right? Like he's just stepping out of step with culture. They're saying we wanted to wait for everyone to get there, and he's going, I'll just do this myself. So that's the first thing. Number 2 is he waters the flock of Laban. We know this is traditionally a woman's job, so that's out of pocket what he does. And then number 3, he sees Rachel as she comes near the well and just begins to kiss her. Now, if you think, I want you to imagine right now, every single woman in here, I would have you raise your hand. I say this every time. Anytime there's a chance to talk about dating, I would have every single person that raise your hands, and I would just start matching you together, but we can't do that, okay? It would be guys and girls. It wouldn't, okay, So anyway, imagine if you're a single lady here, and a guy walks into the space, he sees you, adores your beauty so much, and just begins to kiss you, okay? Now, if you think that's crazy, I want you to imagine how much more conservative this culture is, okay? There are certain parts of the West that you actually might be able to get away with something like that. This culture is far more conservative. This is insane that he would do this, okay? So he sees her and he begins to kiss her. He weeps aloud because of her beauty. Immediately, she does what I pray my daughters would do if a man randomly kissed her. She goes and tells her father, okay? Verse 13, it kind of wraps up scene 1. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, He ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban and all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh, and he stayed with him a month. And that's kind of the end of scene one. So the first one is, honestly, if you're somebody who writes in your Bible, I would write Genesis 24 right there. Genesis 24 almost reads identical to how Abraham's servant arrives and the whole interaction with Rebekah, and Laban steps in as Rebekah's brother, as kind of the patriarch role there, even though it does mention her father here. So same similar thing of what's going on there. That's the end of scene one. They connect. Now that Laban and Jacob have connected, Jacob's been there for about a month. And so the natural question is, hey, you're kind of helping around the house, you're serving in the field. It's only appropriate that we would pay you something, right? And that's what's brought up here in scene 2, verse 15. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now, wages will actually be a big part of the conversation for the next 4 chapters in Genesis. Wages, I think 11 or 12 times, either the noun or verb form appears in them. So it's going to be pretty common. But the question is, well, you're going to be working. I want to be able to pay you. So here's the payment, verse 16. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Poor Leah. This is rough. For the next 2 or 3 chapters, it is rough for Leah. Beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Now, all I want us to see is in the second scene, verses 16 through 20, is the clarity by which the agreement is made. Now, I understand there might be a side conversation of going, like there's this bartering of women. It is a completely different culture. Just know that. It is. The West is so different. In the 21st century in the United States, how we do dating is so antithetical to how the church, it is not that. It's not a suppression of women's rights. It's just the way the culture operated, okay? So I'll leave that for what it is. That being said, the deal is very clear. If you look at it, so Jacob loved Rachel of the 2 daughters, and he said, I will serve you 7 years, here it is, for your younger daughter Rachel. That's clear. If we had a contract, it'd be written in, very well stated here. Verse 19, he goes on, it's better that I give her. Notice Laban's response isn't, yeah, you can take her and her sister. It's very clear, her, as in reference to Rachel. And then you can see it there in verse 20. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Served 7 years for Rachel. The contract is very clear. Jacob now is going to work 7 years to get Rachel. The end of this scene is verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So at the end of this 7 years, which he states seemed like just but a few days, Moses tells us it seems like a few days because of his love. At the end of it, he goes to him and says, hey, listen, now it's time. 7 years, let me have Rachel. This gives us our third scene. Picks up with Laban throwing a feast. Verse 22. So Laban gathered together all the people of that place and made a feast. There's actually 2 wedding feasts in the Old Testament. Both of them are disastrous. The others in Judges 14. So they make a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Now, at this feast, my guess is, just by assumption of how the text rolls out, Jacob gets blitzed at this feast, because what's going to happen now is he's not going to recognize who he is sleeping with. Okay? So, but the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Verse 24, Laban gave her female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? So something real cool. Moses is actually letting us enter into the story from Jacob's eyes. I think it's just a cool notice of the pronoun changes here. In verse 23, we know as the readers of the story, Leah has been replaced for Rachel. We know that. But verse 25 picks up with, in the morning, behold, it was Leah, almost from Jacob's appearance. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Okay, so it's not, Laban kind of did the old switcheroo here. You know, we've all gone through it, the old switching around of the spouse, no, okay. Verse 26, Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn, all right? Genesis, again, is going to pick up on the older-younger motif here. And it's sly on Laban's part. I think of this is an older brother trick, but I have a younger biological brother. And I remember as a kid, one time we had a Gatorade, and we were going to split the Gatorade. Our parents made us split this Gatorade. And so I said, sure, let's split it. And so he gave it to me. I said, I'll drink my half first. And I drank the whole thing, right? And I told him, my little brother's name's Marty. I said, Marty, or I call him Mo, but Mo, the bottom half was my half. I had to go through your half to get to my half. Right? And he's super angry, but I'm his older brother. What's he going to do? I'm going to beat him up, right? And so this is Laban, it's very simple. Yes, we're going to get to Rachel, but to get to Rachel, you got to go through Leah. I mean, the reality is our culture states that the older has to be married off before the younger. This is how we operate, right? And Jacob's obviously upset about this. So here's kind of the plan. This is what Laban brings up. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So you serve 7 years. That earns you Leah, or Leah. Now, Leah, I'm going to call her Leah. Leah. And now I'm going to ask you to serve another 7 years so that you can get Rachel. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to be his daughter Rachel to be her servant. Good Lord. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. Now, if you're wondering why in verse 24 and in verse 29, there seems to be this random mention of the servants going off with both Rachel and Leah, it's actually intentional. You just got to lock that in. They're going to be as important as Hagar and Ishmael were to Abraham and Sarah. They're just important for the story later on. So Moses is just kind of setting us up for that. But the deal now is made again. Okay, great. Well, after a week, let's complete this. Then you can have Rachel. We're just going to kind of reverse engineer the agreement. You work 7 years, you got Leah. Then you can have Rachel and work another 7 years. And so that's exactly what he does. And then it's from the rest of this text. At the end of the 7 years, we get nothing but family drama, okay? So we'll pick that up next week. We get a ton of family drama. And that's kind of the end of this portion of the text, which is cool that we get to read this famous story about how Rachel and Jacob come together, this famous encounter. But here's the problem that I ran into. As we do every single Sunday, we want to be able to go through this text, and upon coming, navigating the text and seeing the minutia and the ins and outs of it, ask this really important question: what are we supposed to do with it? And to be honest with you, up to this point in Genesis, this text has been the most difficult for me to navigate, because usually when we get to the application of it all, you can kind of go, hey, there are 3 or 4 things that you go, here's what we can pull from. The problem is, I see there are 4 things, but depending on how you read the text, they're 4 completely opposite things. So it's not like they go together, all right? So let me read through the text, not all of it. I'm not going to read through it. Explain through the text again, and you could, and I'm just being transparent, I don't know where this lands. Read this text in 4 separate ways. The first one is maybe the most idealistic, helpless, romantic way. This is usually how the text is brought up, whether maybe it's, for a wedding or whatever it is, in regards to spouses. I could tell the story in this way. Here's a man, Jacob. He travels from a far distance to find his spouse. Upon seeing his spouse, they're at a church picnic, and to show how strong he is, he carries 10 chairs, not 8, over to the tables, okay? Of course, she sees this. She's in love with this. He sees her beauty. He lavishes her beauty. He kisses her. He loves her. He loves her beauty. And he is willing to work 14 years to be able to have her as his wife, 7 of which we're told seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. And we could ask the question to those of you who are married or those of you who are dating and want to be married, do you love your spouse or your future spouse like that? I mean, this is, fellas, are you willing to work 14 years to be able to get your spouse? Do you love her beauty? Do you lavish her with kisses? Do you care for her in that way? And so I think, in some ways I'll go, yeah, I can see that. That's helpful. I don't know if that's the point of the text, though, because we could read the same exact story and read it realistically in the context of Jacob and come to the opposite conclusion, because the reality is there's a very thin line between a helpless romantic and a psychopath. And when I read the same story, Jacob isn't traveling a far distance to find a spouse. He is driven by his past deception, running away from it. He's so insecure, he has to show that he's strong in front of this future woman because he's insecure about it. He sees the beauty of a woman and can't control himself, which lines up closer to the Jacob we know in the story so far. And so he begins to kiss this woman, which is absolutely out of bounds culturally. And then finally, what verse 21 seems to be so clearly, he is driven by lust. So we can ask the same question, but in a different way now as we read the same text here. Are you driven by your emotions? I read the story of Jacob and I could see how this story would be unpacked and going, he's just driven by what he wants. Jacob does what he wants. When he wants to do it, he gets what he wants. He takes it. That's been the story of Jacob from the beginning, since we were introduced to him in the book of Genesis. Are you controlled by your emotions in the same way? I think you could come to, but those are two totally opposite things. But I think there's a third thing and a fourth. There's a third thing that you could read this, and it's in light of, I think probably, if I'm being honest, the most, I think, clear in probably how we would read this. And it's not even really about Jacob and Rachel and falling in love or him being crazy or whatever it is. It's far more about, as Kevin DeYoung says, the old adage, what goes around comes around, applies here. The reality is, the world in which we choose to operate in will always have consequences about it. And so now we have a moment where Jacob has only shown us to be a man of deception, even by his own name, is now suddenly deceived. And we can see, it's clear here, if we look at verses 23 and 25 again, 23 through 25, it says this, but in the evening he took his daughter, that's Laban, Leah, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Skip down to verse 25, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Now look at the end of verse 25. Why then have you deceived me? That word deceived in Hebrew is like the word beguiled me. Why have you deceived me? Appears 8 times in the Old Testament, but you'll never guess the first time it appears is in chapter 27, verse 35, applied to Jacob. Moses is methodically here, leveraging the fact that, as John Goldingay says, in Laban, Jacob has met his match. It is not a coincidence that the older-younger motif is being used here. That Jacob wanted the birthright, he wanted the blessing, and so now he sits as the older brother. Tradition would say he should get Leah, but he still wants what he wants. He wants the younger sibling, the more beautiful sibling, the one that he's more attracted to, and he's deceived by an older, younger switcheroo. Does that sound familiar? And so now Jacob is living out the reality in which he is chosen to embark. This is why the day trader goes to prison and asks, why am I going to prison? That's not fair. It's not fair. The audacity of Jacob's question is on the table here. Why, Jacob? Why? Why is your relationship crumbling because you're sexually immoral? Why? Do you want to know why? Why are you hollow at the end of your life? Because you've worshiped money, your bank accounts are full, but your soul is empty? Do you want to know why? When you worship pride and you inundate yourself with the gods of this world, and you wonder why you also have to take on their culture. Why? Because that's a choice you made. I mean, it's so clear in Numbers 32:23. Your sins will find you out. And you think you can continue to embark in whatever this is. Maybe it's not deception. But whatever that is, when you want the gods of this world, you don't just get them and their funness. You get their culture. That's what you get too. And so Jacob has taken on a life of deception. It's inevitable. He's going to be deceived, of course. Now, it's the fourth one, though, that helps us understand what God is ultimately doing in this. And when we were in Matthew, I kept saying, Matthew's an evangelist evangelizing to Jews. And I feel like now that we're in Genesis, I continue to say, based on Genesis 12, God, 12, he has a hope for the nations. Hope for the nations, again and again and again. And here's what's curious. His hope and his plan, he has already determined that he's going to use Jacob and he's going to create 12 separate families, the 12 tribes of Israel. And in creating the 12 tribes of Israel and God's sovereignty and his omniscience and omnipresence, he recognizes that he already has a plan that he's going to have one of those tribes be the Levites, and they're going to be priests. He's going to have another tribe where the Messiah is going to come through, who is the ultimate hope for the nations. And now we're reading a story about Jacob, who loves Rachel and just kind of gets Leah. And now he's going to have children with Rachel and Leah. And you could argue that Jacob wants the exact opposite of the will of God, because you want to know who Levi and Judah come from? Leah. They don't come from Rachel. It's crazy. That was like an amen by the horn. Did you hear that? That was crazy. That was the Lord. Okay, that's confirmation. All right. Okay. So the point being here is what God continues to show himself. It's even not about the older, younger thing. It's about now the rejected thing. God continues to use the lowly, non-desired. I like Rachel more. I don't like Leah. Leah has to come along. And yet God uses Leah's children to have the hope of the nations, that tribe, ultimately the hope of the nations would come from. That's crazy. In the story, we are reminded that God is still doing something and the Messiah comes from such a person. And so we'll continue to read this story about the drama, all of that involved. But however you want to read this, if it is still the hopeless romantic, and if it's the realistic kind of slave to your feelings, if it's kind of being honest that we ultimately will take on the culture in which we embark on, or God moving, I think there could be elements of all of that. But I pray that the Spirit would move in a certain way. But let's pray.